Hi, WFMers out there. I'm your host, Irina Matneva, and this is WFM Unfiltered, a podcast by Right WFM, the place where we share the truth about workforce management. So get comfortable and listen closely. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of WFM Unfiltered, a podcast by Right WFM. I'm your host, Irina Matneva, and I have an amazing guest with me here today, and even more amazing topic. So today we are traveling to New York, and I have Jenn here with me. So Jenn, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's rainy, but I have a smile on my face. I'm ready to go. It's Friday. How are you?
Yes, we are gonna be airing that episode on Tuesday, but it's Friday, very late for me, and you can see it in my face. The energy is basically draining. So I think I'm gonna need another coffee after this. So before we start with our topic, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Again, my name is Jenn Jones, and I'm currently the Director of Strategy and Workforce Management at Navidus Health Solutions, which is a pharmaceutical benefit management company. Company, wonderful people. And as it's budget season, so we're pretty much heads down and just making sure our forecasts are accurate and what we're projecting, and having lots of conversations, building relationship with operations.
Thank you for agreeing to be with me here today. And actually, when we spoke a little bit on the back end, we discussed a topic that you came up with about change management, which is something that I'm very passionate about. And to be honest with you, the first time when I heard the term change management, it was when I was a part of a global rollout. So we had a completely separate team that was dealing with workshops about change management, and I could not understand. I could not comprehend what the hell are they talking about. It's just we're just changing something. Why do we even have to talk about it?
Right.
And then when you start going into the different phases of implementation, that this is actually your foundation. When you're changing something, it has impact on literally everyone in the organization in a different way.
Yep.
And you need to be able to explain the journey to absolutely every single party. Why are you changing? What are you changing for? What will happen from tomorrow? And this is where a lot of projects actually fail because we're failing to adopt that change. So can you please share what's your view on the change management?
Change management, I think, is very crucial to our work of life. And I say that just as a human, and as a business is all the time. So I think change management happens whether we like it or not, but it's heavily important to understand the concept. The reason for that is when we go into business, we have departments that help us through that change. There's implementation teams that help us through that change and guide us in some ways, but there's not a follow-up process sometimes, and also doesn't help you navigate your emotion. And in your real life and when we're outside of work, when we go through change management, there isn't that department that helps you guide yourself through those change. And so all those emotions that come through have never been adjusted. And so when you finally do go through that change management at work, you don't have an idea of how to check those emotions. So I think it's very important that change management is talked about. I think it's very important to acknowledge that we all experience change in different ways. Angry, happy, sad. It just depends on the convenience of the change. If it's for you and we're changing for you, you tend to be happy. If it's a change against your better judgment, you usually don't take it very well. And so you have to learn to work your way around it. So I love change management. I love talking to people about it to get their perspectives and sometimes tips and tricks on how to deal with it and work through it. But it's definitely something that happens regardless if we want to or don't.
You know, I love that you're talking about the emotional aspect because there is a very conservative opinion out there that I'm going to throw right back at you is if we're paying you to do a certain job, shouldn't you be just on board with absolutely everything that we decided as a company to implement because you're being paid for that job? So why should we invest even more into you to accept decision that has been done higher up?
It's a good question. I smile because I think of that as yes men or yes women. And to be honest with you, it depends on the company. If they hired you to be that yes person, then they're expecting you to just go with every punch that's coming, not allowing you to speak to the risk and all that's coming along with it. And then at the end of the day, they come back with the results they didn't want, and they're like, oh, why did this not happen? But if you were hired into a place where you are free to challenge, you are free to harness your opinions through that change management process and actually align the risks and data all together and share that openly, that change management process works out much better because your expectations and results will change. And everything is out in the open with versus you just say, oh yeah, we're going to change. Cool. I'm down with this. Even if you know it's not going to work out and you say nothing, you're just going with the flow. The question of accountability is always going to come back to you. Why didn't you say something? Even though they didn't hire you to say something, why didn't you say something?
I think that's also important from another perspective. We have all been in different operational roles that the thing that annoys us the most is when we do our job and from one day to another, somebody comes and say, oh, because you did not do your job well enough, that's why we're introducing a new tool to help you. But there is that lack of communication. How did you decide on that? Why didn't you involve? Who did you involve? What's going to change? Why are we assuming that things are going wrong?
Right.
And if we bring the conversation to WFM software, the thing that happens so often is because of that mismanagement of expectation, miscommunication. People that start using the software start hating it and start basically working against it. They basically sabotage the process and they make sure that they're going to remain with their current ways of working, whilst it's never tool's fault. Of course, they can have limitations,
Right.
but most often than not is how is it used? What is it used? Have you been trained? Have you been explained what will change for you, for your agents, for your team leads? What would your journey look like? I wanted to ask you about something. How the hell do we work with that? Who is responsible to drive that in the organization?
Great question. I think it's a lottery question. If we can get the answer to that, then we know all. But I believe it's important to think it through a process. There are a lot of models out there, racing models. There's tons of different ways to try to determine who's accountable and who's responsible for different things. And I was just talking to my current leader about this because it's really hard when you have two accountable people in the same space. Because if they're one person not have it, but the other person is, one person's not going to want to take accountability and vice versa. So you really have to think about the question, what is the desired outcome? Who owns the most piece of the pie of that desired outcome? And that will help you learn to who's going to be most accountable. That will help you tie it to which department's going to be impacted the most. So it just depends on the situation. Perfect example. Let's bring on a telephony program. When you think of stakeholders and AIM training and things like that, project management comes into play. But who's going to be responsible for the most impacted party? Is it your operations leader or is it your customer service department leader? Two very separate entities, but they operate in the same function. They're still part of operations majority of the time. But who's going to be responsible for ensuring that telephony program is up and running, efficient, moving everybody into it? Who's responsible for that?
But it's interesting that you're saying that because now I started thinking my journey with change management aspect is that usually we do not invest a lot of time to do the pre-work to understand exactly what is changing. So start with the rollout.
Yep.
We start with the design of your new system, whether it's telephony, CRM, or WFM, doesn't matter. And then at some point we start adapting to, oh, you're going to get training, you're going to get this, you're going to get that. But this is a reactive approach. We just don't say, okay, you know what, we're changing this to this for this and that reason. This is what the expectation is for every single party. And we're not proactively driving that approach.
Right.
So I was actually one who instigate that. If you think about it, who should come into play if it's not decided on, I don't know, contact center manager level or operations manager level? Who is in charge of saying, you know what, we're missing a link here?
A very strong leader. Somebody who sees the gap has to come in and help make that decision. It's a very hard scenario what I would agree with you on is most times the rollout already happens and then you have to adjust to it. Like you may not help make that decision, but the rollout is happening. Now, what do you do? Totally agree with that. I believe for me, depending on the department who you're leading, you actually have to take it back and be like, what is the desired outcome that's happening to this rollout? And how is it impacting us in our responsibilities? And then you have to turn it back around and bring it back to whoever made the decision. Said, hey, as we're rolling this out, I have found this and this to be good and bad. This is how we're working through those things. What is your suggestion to work through those things at a higher level based on how this impacts you? So there's no easy answer to who's responsible and accountable for those pieces once it rolls out. Wish it was, but normally a strong leader comes in from somewhere, whether that be PMs or the executive teams, and notices there's a gap within the rollout. It comes in to identify it, understands why, and then starts to make the decision as to what's happening during this rollout. Is it even necessary? And what did we miss? And how we learn.
For me, I think one of the biggest mistakes is actually not involving people that are the operations department that are actually executing the job, because you're technically enforcing something new to them without explaining them what to expect.
Right.
But then your expectation is that they're going to be able to execute their job in a better way.
Yep.
Usually when talking about digital solutions, for example, or any sort of transformation, we do it because we're growing. We do it, we need more efficiency. We do it because we need to do some kind of cost cuts, and or our contracts, for example, are expiring. So you're looking for a new solution.
Correct.
I actually have been involved with the implementation a couple of months ago, and it was so sad. I was reviewing the setup with, and this is something that happens literally every single time. I was reviewing the setup with the team, and I was asking, why are you doing that? We don't know. Why is that working like that? We don't know. What do you mean you don't know? What happened during your training? We didn't have a training. And I was like, how was decided? We don't know. And I was like, how do you do your job? How? We're like, we ask for support and we don't get it. Like that. You know what? That's so sad, because you're asking for results from the very same people that you're importing something to them, but you don't involve them at all in your journey.
Which is comical, because you're like, all right, so this is rolling out. I have a list of questions. Boom. Then when every answer to your question is, I'm not sure, not my department, I don't know, maybe, you're like, oh, okay. Who do I go to get some of these answers? Me. And that's the part of change management where the emotions tie in that we are majority of the time not coached on. And so your face changes, your tone changes, and you're like, what in blazes is going on right now? Because you still have to go through this rollout and have the expectations of performance results that you're supposed to deliver. That.
You know what? I think also the worst part for you from employee perspective is that, yes, you're behaving based on your emotions, but you're trying to do your best. But you're looked as you're sabotaging the process, when in fact you just are left clueless to sort stuff out yourself. But it's actually perceived like, oh, you're working against the company, or you don't have the company's best interests, and you don't believe in our corporate strategy or whatever. No, I just don't get it. I really don't know what to do right now.
Well, yeah. Where do you start? Like, where do you begin to even, because you're still at square zero. So where do you begin to figure out those answers to your question, but also the project? Because technically you have to figure out how this impact's going to come to you, how you're going to adjust. And you're like, I just want to know where I start with answer to question 1. Please.
Yeah, I think that it's okay if you're talking about global organizations, because you obviously have teams, so you can allocate someone to do that kind of initiatives.
Sure.
For rather smaller organizations, it's very difficult because of the size, because of the budget, because what happens. So what do we do, Jenn? What do we advise people to do on this one?
Well, you're coming with the great questions on a Friday. Let me tell you.
Your advice shouldn't be please quit. You shouldn't actually do that. So what do we do?
What has helped me, what I'll say has helped me, is I went through a process called AIM training, and it was very helpful to understand what does it mean to be an impacted person. And so whenever you come across, and it is part of like a project management scope, because anytime there's a rollout, there's a hidden project that all of a sudden comes upon you. So if something's rolled out, that's a hidden project for you to understand what was rolled out. How are you going to implement it across your position and your department or yourself? And then understand what those impacts are so you can still deliver and perform. How does it affect you? So my advice to everybody would be is take a step back, get yourself emotionally out of this, because it doesn't matter why it was rolled out to you. It already is. Mm-hmm. What you mostly are concerned is what is it and when is it going to be implemented fully? So that way you understand what you need to focus on. That would be my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice is you need to know who are your main players in the game. And usually it's listed on that rollout. It was like, so usually it's a nice and fancy paragraph of this person came up with this magical beans idea and it's going to be wonderful. And you start there. Like, okay, great. And then somewhere in small lettering in this nice, beautiful paragraph is that this will impact such, and we are expected to perform such and such. That's where you need to key into to be like, okay, this is a performance thing. This is where I impact the performance. This is me. And identify that. And then understand what your processes are that impact that performance at a base level. So take up the emotion. Doesn't matter why it happened. It doesn't matter who made the decision overall and then talk to you about it. It doesn't matter. What is it and when is it going to happen, and start there. Then understand who came up with the idea, the topic, and then understand what is the expected impact is going to be in that small lettering to determine what your next steps are. So those would be my top two pieces outside of seeing the key players so you know exactly what this is going to be. Final note is the key players are important. If you see CEO on there, it is not the CEO majority of the time. It is, they may be a sponsor and the money is coming from them, but that does not necessarily mean that they're leading these meetings. So you might have to do a little more research. Versus if this is, say, an operations director, that's a much better thought process to think, okay, they are really going to be involved in this process. So it's going to be better to reach out to them because they'll know, they're more in the weeds. They'll understand the questions that are going to come to them. So keep that in mind as well.
I love your advice. And this is such a good also pre-work and a way to set up your process to be a success rather than a fail. And I actually, when I asked you the question, had the similar thought. Like for me, this is also a big part of the pre-work to identify what is it that you're going to do, who is going to be involved, how is it going to be involved, who is going to be, as you mentioned, accountable for everything. And I personally think that when you have done that bit and when you have identified, okay, those are my key players, they're going to be impacted in whatever type of way, I would say that just take people from the different groups, involve them in the journey to be ambassadors, because they would be able to relate to their co-workers that are executing their job and mention, okay, we're doing that so it can help us in this way. Or this is going to be our new ways of working or our new process or what have you. But usually what happens is that we are organizing a big project for whatever reason is decided. And then it's just landed upon us and we're expecting to cheer and fully embrace it when we don't understand it. And the thing that I keep coming back that I absolutely love that you started with that is emotion. Because we are not yet working completely with AI and with computers. No matter what we're paying, no matter who we're paying, people are emotional human beings and they're going to react one way or another. And if you're disregarding that part of humanity, okay, cool.
You're completely correct. And it's going to happen. There's always going to be something that you found out via email or word of mouth that should have been told to you. And what you're expecting is a one-on-one meeting that was scheduled 6 months ahead of time and it was laid out perfectly to you. So when it's not, that already gives you, and it already heightens you. You're like, give me that meeting? What? And I have to find out like this?
That, do you know what I'm thinking? When we're talking about change management, it's a consistent effort. It's not one of meetings like, we have bought a new WFM tool. Good luck. There will be training. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Training. Amazing.
Right. Thanks. Which is a good point. That's why the emotion part is so important, because you can be consistently hit with multiple things that you have to adapt to. And in our space, that's normal. And we're constantly adapting to changes in forecasts and changes in volume and changes in people and people's behaviors. And we're constantly doing things. Not everybody is. So when we are approaching change management for something we need to implement, we have to keep that in mind. Because I think sometimes we forget that not everybody is multitasking as much as we are and doing 9 things at one time. We just automatically think that, okay, we're doing it, so they should be able to do it. So I'm going to implement this new real-time adherence strategy to improve efficiency, and we're going to implement it in a month. But it's going to require the supervisor to do this. So we go to implement it, and they're like, whoa, this is going to increase my admin time and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, what do you mean? I do this every day. So taking the emotions from other people is also something we should consider and be trained on, or at least talk through, and just being graceful to other people's areas when we also deliver a change.
And this is, such a key point, because when we're talking about implementation of whatever type of change with the digital tool, with the process, with what have you, we need to understand that if we don't involve our people correctly, that change will impact your customers. And I think this is the part that we're lacking, because we're thinking, okay, but we invested that amount of money and you should be on board because our strategy is this and this. Yes, but if you do not drive that process in the right way, it will impact your customer. And that's a change that you don't want to see. The way that whether your agents are going to be stressed, something is not going to be working, they're going to be snappy, we're not going to be able to handle customers, we're going to start losing business, and then we're going into that spiral of what the hell is happening.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Like, the external impact to customers is huge. That's normally not thought about. It's thought about idealistically, but it's not in a reality phase of it. So that's a great point. And then when it does happen and it's just a negative impact, now what? Like, what happens now?
And the beauty is that then we're starting to look back and point fingers like, oh, why is that working like that? We should have done that pre-work by doing exactly the steps that you have mentioned, involving the different people, make people accountable. So we know our scenarios, so we know what to expect. And you know that very well, that usually on go live days, it's chaos.
Oh yeah.
There's something going wrong. Everyone is stressed. People don't sleep. We're working over the night to make cutovers. It's crazy journey. And a lot of things, to be honest, can be, or at least the impact can be lessened for so many things. If we only do our...
Absolutely. And I think that's the key part there, is the due diligence and being intentional to do it. That's a big one.
Thank you so much, Jenn, for joining me for this conversation. And thank you for bringing up that topic, because this is one that I'm absolutely crazy about. And I think it's one of these that are absolutely fundamental and nobody's paying attention to them, because it's like, why is that important? So thank you for actually raising the awareness and clearing the picture of why and how and what can we do if we decide to apply any sort of change in the company.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I love this conversation. So I'm sure we'll have more pieces of it down the road, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you as well. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Irina Matneva, founder of Right WFM, where we believe that every business and its people are unique and deserve the right solution to their challenges. If you need support with workforce management, we're just a message away. Get in touch at irina@rightwfm.com or info@rightwfm.com. If you like the content and would like to support the show, please subscribe to WFM Unfiltered on your favorite podcast platform, leave a review, and follow me on LinkedIn. You can also show some love to our great sponsors. For more information about them, check out the episode notes. This is your place for real WFM, so to suggest guests or topics, get in touch at irina@rightwfm.com. See ya!